Welcome to Higher Ed Matters. Our guest today is John McGreal. He's from Waukesha County Technical College, and he is the Dean of Enrollment Services. So welcome, John.
Thanks so much, Josh.
So I figured we'd kind of kick this off and tell me a little bit about your journey to Waukesha.
Yeah, my journey here, I started off like a lot of folks in in enrollment as that road runner. And that was at a small private liberal arts college in Northern Illinois. And then I had the opportunity to work for a state flagship regionally in the state of Wisconsin. So I was able to move up to Milwaukee, which as a lifelong Illinoisan, not the city I thought I'd live in, but definitely was the city that's become home for me. And so I spent about 7 years there where I was a recruiter and then eventually oversaw all of our greater Midwest recruitment efforts and strategies. And we ultimately were responsible for about 18% of the campus's enrollment. So then, my wife and I moved up to kind of the Green Bay, Appleton area in the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin. For any Wisconsinites listening, they'll know the area. And I became the director of admissions enrollment management at a health science focused institution up in Green Bay. Was there for about a year and some change. And then, through some personal circumstances, we really needed to make a move and leave where we were at to come on back down to really what's become our home in Milwaukee. And at that point, WCTC, because saying Waukesha County Technical College is going to get really old after a while, WCTC was looking for this new position. They never had it before, of the Dean of Enrollment Services. And so it just kind of came together a little bit in harmony. And it also was a good alignment of like personal mission, which was really nice. So I am very much someone who believes that all education, K-12 or higher education, should be a public good. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity to work at a 2-year technical or community college really is a dream for me, because it's that embodiment as close as we can get in the higher ed space of a public good, which is really exciting.
Definitely. That's always been, in my career, very similar. Started as a road runner, for years and doing that. Of just, it's always been a super interest to be at the 2-year community and technical colleges, just because I think that they play such a vital role within the community. And, a lot of times we talk about access, and I think that that's one brilliant way that's providing access at an affordable cost for students. So yeah, I think it's great that they're moving in that direction. What kind of are the expectations, since this is a new role for them? What kind of the expectations and kind of the vision that you have moving forward for this new role?
Yeah, the expectations are really to craft, at least what our president is referring to, really in two veins. One, a sustainable enrollment management plan, right? We know that the enrollment cliff is coming for us, whether we're ready for it or not. So, and it probably makes a lot of people in my role and in similar roles very scared, right? And very understandably so, right? Looking at some of these numbers, and we know now we're gonna have another blip in about 18 years, right? Where people weren't having as many children. So, so one of it is creating that sustainable enrollment management plan that really allows us to sustain enrollment, not necessarily like worry about uncontrolled growth or anything like that, but just keep things steady and reliable. And if we can push the envelope on net tuition revenue, that's going to be great, of course. But as long as we can kind of maintain, that's kind of been the charge. And the other piece of it is talking about the modern college. What does a modern college in 2022 really look like? And how do we build something for 2023 and 2033 and beyond that is sustainable? And that, of course, if you're talking about at a high level, always then filters down to, okay, what does that look like at an institutional level, at a divisional level, at a unit level, right? So what does a modern enrollment services area look like? Which, if anyone's got a great answer, McGreal at wctc.edu, just send it my way. But it's definitely something that's exciting to talk about, right? We get to craft this whole thing together and really build this vision moving forward. So that's kind of the expectation. It's nice and broad and loose and allows for a lot of creativity. So we'll definitely have that chance to explore what it is, and maybe we can do a follow-up someday and check in 3 years and see if I still have any hair left.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. I mean, it's, I think, especially, given the state of community colleges and technical schools, COVID, we know, hit the community colleges and the technical schools so hard, and I think it was so unexpected. I think everybody was really super concerned for, the small private colleges of the world and how they're struggling already. This is only going to make it worse. And I don't know about you, but it totally blindsided me when, for the most part, small colleges came out okay. Most of them were probably fairly flat, which during the pandemic is a achievement in itself. Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked at how many folks I'm like, just what are the goals? Flat. And I'm like, never in my career did I ever expect to walk into a meeting and say, the president says if we just stay flat, we're okay. So in terms of the pandemic, are you seeing, a return back to kind of quote unquote normal after the pandemic? And what do you foresee kind of the challenges that ultimately, hopefully we're passing through COVID? What are those long-term challenges that you think that schools like yours are going to face?
Yeah, this is a great question. I don't think there is going to be a return to normal, right? I think we have to, and that's why I said quote unquote, right? Like we have to forget what normal was because that's just not the marketplace anymore. I was at a session yesterday that was talking about, and it's talking about different ways to engage students, right? And different ways to reach out to certain populations that have left. And one of the things that they talked about is the notion of high flex scheduling, right? And where, content's being presented in classroom on Monday, let's say, but it's being recorded. So that student who maybe misses the classroom, they can log on, still watch it, still get credit for attendance that way through some, tracking systems and LMSs and moving forward. And I think higher education and learning has to think that way, right? Has to think, how can we be super flexible, right? Because if you get COVID, you're gone for 2 weeks, right? That's just what it is. You got to stay home and you can't come to that classroom. But a student shouldn't be penalized because they happen to get sick in a raging pandemic, right? And for better or for worse, we're living with COVID. So we have to adapt and figure out how to live with COVID, right? And I think that very much is something we have to think about in the enrollment space as well, is how do we tell our story when we don't know if that visit event we've been planning for 3 months is actually going to happen or not, right? Because all of a sudden, oh no, the COVID weatherman is coming across and saying it's spiking and we got to shut things down again. Right? Yeah. Obviously, we don't want to go back there, right? We don't want to go back there. We have great mitigation techniques now, but that is going to affect whether or not someone shows up to that event on Thursday night, right? And how we treat it. So we have to make sure that we're working in multiple channels to really push forward, right? And think about, okay, we're delivering this event. Are there pieces we can stream live? Are there pieces, and be okay not getting that student data if we're streaming it live, right? Because the medium, especially at a 2-year institution, is probably going to be, is probably going to be Facebook Live, right? And we're not going to get that data. Or if someone else, again, if there's another medium I'm not thinking about, but like, we're gonna have to be okay just knowing that our information is out there a little bit. And that is a very uncomfortable place for a data-oriented industry. I know we've talked so many times about the types of data we need, Josh, and to say, okay, we're just gonna put this out in the ether and not know what the ROI on it is frightening, right? It's terrifying. But I think we have to think critically about, okay, where else can we put this information? Is there a way to get some data on it so we know its effectiveness? So I would love to see how can we leverage things like Conduit and Platform Q into something like that, where we are really blending a live and virtual event synchronously and asynchronously, right? And I think that's something we have to think about when it comes to doing some of that outreach. And then really frankly, thinking about what we can do to recover a little bit from this, we have to get back to fundamentals, right? And do the fundamentals of admissions fundamentally well, right? It's about personalization. It's about follow-up. It's about knowing that a student really does just want to hear a, hey, congrats, you're accepted call, even if it was predestined, right? Even if they knew it was going to happen. Just that phone call or a voicemail or a text or whatever medium you want to go with, just something personalized and not asking for anything in that moment is going to be so powerful, right? Just to say, hey, Josh, I don't want anything from you today. I just want to say congrats. You're in college. what do you need from me? And having that moment to really be relational in your approach.
Absolutely. It's really, I think it's embracing that empathy and allowing us to kind of sit in it for a minute. I love the idea of congratulations. Enjoy this moment. Like, that's it. I'm not going to ask you for an enrollment deposit. I'm not asking you to register for classes today, but allowing students to celebrate those moments. I try to, of course, my glass is always was it half full, and trying to look at like the positive side of things, right? So I do think that that's part of some of the, if we can call them gifts of COVID. I don't know that we could actually say that, but just looking at some of the things that this terrible situation gave us, but then really highlighting some of the, look at the opportunities that it did give us. It gave us a time to step back and kind of reevaluate, which higher ed is needed for quite some time.
For quite some time, right? I was having this conversation the other day, like, this system that we exist in was developed in the 1700s.
Yep.
Like, it goes back 300 years, and we've made adjustments, but have we really thought the model through again? When you have places like Google and LinkedIn doing learning, doing credentialing, offering certificates, and the marketplace is going to value that, right?
Right.
So if they're going to do that, we have to think critically about what we're doing as well. And is it looking into guided pathways and embedded credentials along the way, right? So if I have an associate's degree in engineering, is there a certificate that we get along the way that goes along with that, and building those pathways all the way through? And that's a huge piece of the conversation at the two-year technical schools right now, is these guided pathways. You want to study science in some capacity, you want to go into engineering eventually, but what are the skills we can give you along the way that can help you, that if COVID does happen and you have to stop out for a period of time, that you've got something.
Yeah.
Right? You've got something that you can go to an employer and say, hey, I've got this skill set. What can I do? Right? Because the other thing that we're seeing is people found out, hey, I can make a lot of money on Etsy, or just as much on Etsy as I did working at the gas station.
Yeah.
So let me go do that, because it's a whole heck of a lot more fun than standing behind a counter for 8 hours a day. Right?
Absolutely.
And so we have to think critically about it and say, what can we do to provide additional value?
Mm-hmm. And I think that you all are in an interesting place because technical and community colleges are so nimble. They respond so quickly to the market and to the environment and their community, that there is this, I think, wonderful opportunity of those that did find success on Etsy to think, yeah, you have the tools, but imagine if you went further. What if we dove deeper and, you got, or you took courses in business or got some type of certification that really is going to take you from here to like a whole new level. And I think that that's a voice that you really could like drum home with these students to say, an education is still very valid and very necessary to take you from here to there.
Right. We want to help you skill up, right?
Yep.
We want to take that thing that you discovered, right? Whether it was during COVID or just some other point in time, like, we have to be able to say, you learned this thing about yourself. Okay. Let's apply it to what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say, okay, you develop that shop on Etsy, and now you want to take that next step. You really like this. You like this idea. Let's give you some skill sets in marketing. Let's give you something in supply chain or whatever it is, right? Because we have to think critically about what our shortfalls are as a society to be able to go in. And one of the things that I think we have to do better at community college level is telling that story, right? And I think that might be true of higher ed overall. But like communicating that story of, here's your passion, this is where we're involved, and this is where we're going to get you.
Yep.
It's not about us, right? It's about making sure you, the student, have that opportunity to explore what you want to do and where you want to go. And one of the roadblocks that I think institutions like mine have is we're really restricted at WCTC on where we can market.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've got to stay in it's a literal box. I've seen it on the map. Like, we literally have a box we have to stay in for marketing. And that's hard. So that makes it hard for us to kind of cut through that noise to kind of, in the long run, carry the message of what two-year in technical education can do for you.
Sure.
Because we're limited to the audience, right? And we have the ability to go to some things outside of our district, but we're really technically supposed to stay within our area and within our territory, which is strange.
I recently read an article in Inside Higher Ed that Pikes Peak, Community College is recently looking to drop community from their name, because community, and I've heard the same thing with the term technical, is that there is a perception. And there is a brand perception, a brand challenge, a marketing challenge of offerings, and being kind of held to this perception that even to the extent of less than maybe than the 4 years. And I think that we've kind of perpetuated that in our own different ways, myself included, having come from a 4-year side. But do you think the potential of dropping the term community or the term technical do you see this as an opportunity to kind of right the wrong, or is it just kind of more noise in an already crowded marketplace?
Honestly, I think it's noise. I was doing a lot. This was a really interesting question. And so as I was thinking about it and doing some reading, and I read that article and I pulled a few others. And what was funny was one of the top 10 searches on Google, right? Is where everyone goes. You never get past that first page. But one of the things that came up was an article from 2014, 8 years ago, about the Seattle community colleges dropping community, just calling them Seattle colleges. And in some of that reading there was never once any mention of this is what increased enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the data to support it? So I think it's noise. As a technical college and as a community college, I think we have to take it almost as a badge of honor a little bit, right? This is who we are, and not be ashamed of it, right? We're serving this population. One of the things on my whiteboard behind me, you can see different populations that we work with. And I've got like stop outs, high school students, reskilling, upskilling, career changes, guest students, working professionals, reverse transfers. The populations that we work with at a 2-year level, I think are done a disservice if we don't call us what we are, right? And so I think dropping that tag is I think as you said it, right, it's noise. I mean, I'd be curious if you or if anyone's heard otherwise, but I think it's all noise.
No, I agree completely. And I read another article that was almost an exact opposite. And it was like, now's the time to lean in. And kind of like what you're talking about, the truth in advertising and the truth in marketing. And I think that, again, is one of the things that the pandemic gave us, is that, a 4-year education isn't for everybody. And, our society cannot exist and we can't thrive if we're putting, if everybody fits into that kind of mold.
Exactly. And you're also turning off like really well-paying careers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the fact of the matter is, if we continue to push down those types of programs, those types of degrees, there's going to be an increased labor shortage in that area. And that's what we have to lean into, right? We have to say, this is who we are. And we also have to really work on dispelling a lot of myths, right? Because there are so many myths about 2-year and technical education out there.
It really is. But I mean, and that goes towards, it's not just like the technical side of it, but it's also the community side of it, or there's amazing liberal arts programs out there also offered for people who, want to, retool, they want to, like, it's been a while. I was thinking the other day, I was writing a proposal, and my writing skill is probably not where it should be. So I was like, maybe I need to go back. Maybe I need to take a class because I want to retool. I want to better myself in those situations. So there is so many opportunities. Do you find, because you do have so many populations, like you mentioned, there's so many students and people that you can identify to help, whether it's coming out of high school, whether it's, it is a career change or just wanting to certify up. How do you work those populations? How do you put a precedent on, okay, this is where we want to focus right now, versus the whole shotgun approach and we're just going to throw it out there and hope for the best?
I think it's incredibly difficult, right? And one of the things I think we have to, I think one of the things that we're talking intentionally about here is, how do we target those efforts, right? Where do we put our energy, right? There's a reason why high school students are the bread and butter of most institutions, right? Because they're captive. We
Yep.
know where they are 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. We can physically go there. We can harangue their school counselors and say, hey, I need to talk with some students, right? Like we can do that. And so I think that bread and butter and that base of high school students has to be important. But I think especially on the 2-year community and technical college side, what we have to do is think about in our area, where do we have opportunity with those non-traditional populations, right? With your upskilling students, with community partners, right? So I think we have to think through that lens of what community partnerships can we make with CBOs, with companies in the area, doing outreach, working with those career fairs, right? And attacking this problem from multiple perspectives, right? I think about when you have an enrollment decline, what are the two things that you need to do? You need to boost applications, you need to boost yield. We have to think about that the same way when it comes to approaching the top of the funnel, right? We can't just look at the bread and butter. We have to look at some unique things of saying, okay, where can we generate those applications from and how do we go about doing it?
So I know you mentioned earlier, and I think it's an important topic, of course, to hit on, is this enrollment cliff. And for folks, hopefully everybody knows about the enrollment cliff at this point. But if you're not, that there's expecting, I think it's 2026, if I'm not mistaken, the high school graduation is supposed to drop, I think, for the first time in 50 years, maybe even longer. And it's supposed to dive pretty quickly. And of course, it's correlation to the Great Recession. And so, we didn't, those that lived through it, that was when pretty much I was starting my career. What a great time to start a career in higher education.
I was graduating, man, so I feel you.
But of course, the people were not having kids. I mean, that was when there is uncertainty. That's one of the first things to unfortunately go. So, knowing that this cliff is happening, it sounds like, leadership is completely on board with where you're at. But are there anything that you're trying to implement that may kind of support you during those couple of years, or?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing right now with our nursing program, and like nursing programs everywhere, right? It's limited. They got X number of spots. Everyone wants one. There's a waiting list longer than my arm, right? Like it's just, there's just so much with that. One of the things that we're doing with them right now is we're right sizing. So we're working on adjusting how many applicants, when do we cut that process off? Like, what does this look like? How do we adjust we have what's called a petitioning process for some of our restricted enrollment programs here. And so how do we right size those, get the right number of applicants, get the right number of students in the petitioning process to fill those seats, right? So it's, even more than when I was on the 4-year side, I feel like I'm talking about like, okay, what's my yield metric? What's this? And looking granular at one program. And here I thought it was an open access institution. We are, I say that glibly, but we are definitely an open access institution, but there are programs that have to be right sized, right? That we have to be respectful of our, I said this the other day, people are not always thrilled when you refer to students as customers, but ultimately that's what they are, right? And because we have to be respectful of the fact that they've got time, right? We have to be respectful of that student to say, yep, we've only got these many spots, right? And this is what it's going to look like, and be upfront and transparent about it. So I think right sizing is something that we're really looking at. We're trying it with these programs, and then we're probably going to bring it out to a few other areas, right? To be able to say, what is the base enrollment that we think we can sustain, as opposed to, so it's, I think of sustainable enrollment as kind of an evolution of strategic enrollment, right? Strategic enrollment was a lot about like, let's get more and more students, right? Let's get as many pieces of the pie as we can get. And I think sustainable enrollment is taking that next step, saying, okay, here's the tools that we have to do this from a strategic lens, but what is the right number of students?
Yeah.
Right. What is the right number of students where we are delivering a quality product, a quality education? We're able to handle the volume of people who are trying to reach out to us from an enrollment and recruitment perspective. and what's a good classroom size so that classroom experience is really good, right? Because we want to have, that smaller student to faculty ratio, so they get that personalized attention that we know that they're going to want. We want to make sure that we have enough support resources. We know there's a mental health crisis going on as well. We need to bring all of that into the main of the enrollment, right? To say, okay, here's where what we're gonna do. The other thing that I'm looking at, and this is hot off the presses, my staff barely even knows about this. So we're gonna be adjusting how we do some of our work. And we're going to have focus areas for recruiters. So it's not their travel territory, their recruitment territory, right? There's still going to be territory managers, but they're going to have focus areas on specific populations, right? So I have a recruiter who's going to be focused on first generation and underrepresented populations. Another is going to be focused on adult populations, right? And so they are like the team lead on this, and that's going to give them a lot of autonomy. And hopefully help us address some of these population issues, right? Of having so many populations focused on, that one person is going to kind of be the spearhead for that. And I'll be really interested to see how that works out. The other thing from a leadership perspective that gets me really excited, I literally just got goosebumps talking about this. So if you can't tell, I'm a little excited that I get excited about is we're also in the midst of this great resignation, right?
Yeah.
These are indirect leadership roles then for those staff, right? Which helps build their confidence, help build their skill set so that we hopefully can retain them, or we're setting them up for that next opportunity, right?
And it's so important. Sorry, it's so important. We focus, and as rightfully so, we focus so much on the students, but I think that that's a really important aspect to ensure that we're taking care of our own. That, it's the team that is bringing these students to us. And this is I know we could speak on this probably for hours on hours, but ensuring that your team, not only compensation, of course, is a big piece of it, but it's the opportunities for growth. It's the opportunities to, expand both their personal and professional experiences, and that the quality of life component of it as well too. And I think that that's a piece that I'm hoping higher ed as a whole starts to really lean into it, to realize that you can't treat your roadrunners like just basic stuff, that maybe put them up in a Hilton once in a while instead of the Motel 8. You know what I mean? Like there's little things that we can do.
I have to tell you a story now because I completely agree. I completely agree that you have to. We've got to treat that staff with such care, right, and such attention, and really all of our staff, right. I look, I have a staff of nearing 30 here, and all of them look tired right now because it's May 11th, right? And even though May 1 isn't as big of a thing on the technical side, and well, not as big of a thing anymore industry wide, thanks DOJ. They all look tired, right? And they're worn out because we've been operating such a fever pitch, right? And the pandemic put us into crisis mode. It was, okay, let's get virtual. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. We got to do more, got to do more, got to do more. And now that we're coming back to whatever this new normal is that we all get to create together, which is terribly exciting, we have to think about how we're treating our staff in that moment, right? And like I think back, I had a conversation with HR the other day about a CRM role being posted to be remote. Well, of course that role can be remote. They're internal facing only. Right. That person can absolutely be remote. We think about that. We think about flexible scheduling. I do have to tell you a story about the Hilton. Definitely, if any admissions directors out there are listening, please put your staff up in nice hotels, at least Holiday Inn or better. Like let's strive for mediocrity or Holiday Inn or better. Because I stayed at a hotel once at the behest of my director, who was like, John, you've been staying at some expensive hotels. And so I was traveling to Marinette, Wisconsin, which if you don't know where that is, that's fine. Don't worry about it. It's literally in the middle of nowhere on the way up to the UP. And I stayed at a place called the Marinette Inn, $60 a night. So whatever mental image just popped into your head, it's probably decently accurate. Like literally I put my suitcase down on the bed, dust flew out. There was no shower curtain. bar soap was unwrapped. For the love of God, just put your people up in a nice hotel.
Well, John, I really appreciate you joining me today. I am excited to watch Waukesha. I think that you guys have got some exciting things. I think that you're going to do some really cool and innovative things that is going to be kind of the gold standard for community and technical colleges. So, of course, let's definitely stay in touch. And
Absolutely.
I would love to do, after you get some seniority in there and you get your heels dug in, I'd love to see what you all are doing, because I think, again, you guys are doing some really cool things. So I'm excited for y'all.
That'd be great.